Hello, let's talk about some things. So this video is a combination of me complaining about the worst job I've ever had and talking about how not to be a terrible manager. So what makes me, a random 25-year-old with colored hair and many piercings on the internet, qualified to talk about workplace managerial stuff? Well, first of all, I was in this job, so there's that. But also, my first master's degree was in management leadership with a concentration in strategic leadership. A lot of the program was focused on project management and working with people and different styles of leadership, combined with, again, I was in that job, I was a manager. And my more recent employment was as a marketing coordinator. So while I didn't have anybody that worked under me necessarily, aside from some interns, I did a lot of coordinating. The worst job I ever had was truly terrible, not because of the job itself. Just going based on the job description, it doesn't go with my particular interest per se, but it was a job that I felt like I could see myself doing for a long time. And I ended up doing it for about a year because it was bad. And the thing that made it bad was the way that I was treated. I feel like it won't be too hard for you to figure out where I worked, but for reasons I'm not going to specify where I worked. I will say it was a major retail company and I worked in the sort of store remodel division. So I went from store to store managing their remodels. Now, I was only in this job for about a year, and it takes 3 to 6 months to be involved in one remodel project. Mind you, this was also end of 2019 into the beginning of 2020, which means that there was a time when we weren't doing any remodel work because it was COVID. And pretty much all of that experiences really happened in one particular project. Everything that I'm talking about in this video is really one project. The generalized structure, there was my boss, there was me and several of my peers, and then there was some sort of lower middle management, and then the regular hourly employees. I should say that the lower middle management were also hourly employees. I was on night shift, which I was already salty about because I have more specialization with the work that's typically done on mid shift. The person who was on mid shift did not want to be on mid shift. So the way that the whole remodel process works is first a team, which ended up being the team I was on, they go into the store and they basically just do a generalized assessment. We don't get the blueprint for what the store is going to look like. We just go in and say, these are the pieces that they currently have. It's literally just going all throughout the store and looking at all of their counters. How many shelves do they have? How much pegboard do they have? We also look at some of the more hidden parts of the counter, like cake plates and all sorts of things. We don't count anything that we know we're going to have to throw away when all is said and done. And our job is basically just to input all of this information, and then magic happens and we're given a budget. So in this process, we got done a little bit early. And so my boss offers the store to have us help out with just running freight and straightening up shelves and stuff. And this is where I get to my first tip. Establish proper expectations. I think it's fine that we helped out the store. We were there anyway. We were being paid anyway. Might as well do it. But my boss went to the store manager and said, if you need help throughout the remodel, let us know. We're happy to help you out. Keep in mind, we have maybe 3 months, not including weekends, to completely redo the entire store. If you have been into retail stores lately and you've seen how they looked 10 years ago to now, you know that that means the entire store. Everything from the floor to the ceiling, from the checkouts to the bathroom. Granted, there are generally multiple teams involved. So my team was specifically involved more in the sales floor, dealing with counters, dealing with merchandise, also dealing with quite a bit of the technology. There were specialists for the plumbing and electricity, and if anything, like walls had to be built, like construction wise. There's still a lot of work to be done that we can't stop and help the store out all of the time. Knowing the personalities I was working with, I'm not sure that establishing the right expectations off the bat would have been a huge help, but it would have helped out at least a little bit. because there was very poor establishment of what expectations the store should have for what my team was going to be doing. So I mentioned that there are a lot of teams that are actually involved in a remodel. My boss was not very good at orchestrating where these teams were supposed to go when, which brings me to my second tip. Really think through your plan. My boss was a terrible planner. A big issue that we had on this particular project was that everybody was sort of working on top of each other. It was very common for the painters and the electricians and my team to all be working in a very similar area. And this became especially problematic when we got into the garden center of the store. The garden center of the store, I think, had been added on after the store was built. And so it was sort of this separate, almost closed off room. When the painters were in there, the smell of the paint just sort of filled the space. It did not feel safe to be in there without a mask. Mind you, this is about late March, early April at this point. 2020. So we are in the early days of the pandemic when everybody is panic buying everything, which means there are no masks to be found anywhere in the store. And I have 30 plus employees who are absolutely refusing to do anything in the garden center, which is exactly where we're scheduled to be for everything that we need to accomplish that night. And while I understand that, if somebody's going to be blamed, it's going to be the manager, and so it became my problem, I also can't really fault my employees for not wanting to be in that space. Paint fumes can be very dangerous, especially in such concentration, and especially considering we were about to spend 9 hours in that space. But also, it was very common for some sort of construction to be happening in the same space we needed to be. This particular store was also completely redoing the floors, so we had a floor team, and there was a lot of mismatch of where we needed to be working and where we needed to move the counters to and where the floor people were working. So again, with all of these teams, everybody is more or less responsible for cleaning up their own messes. While I did have to do some coordinating with some of these other teams, my job was not to work with them or to tell them what to do. The leaders of those teams were technically, from a corporate level, equal to me. I was not their boss. But sometimes they were slow to pick up after themselves, sometimes they left messes. And because I was always the easiest manager to find, guess who got blamed? So tip number 3 has a lot to do with being respectful. Respect can look a lot of different ways, but I think the general idea behind respect is to not cause unnecessary embarrassment to the people around you. So it had been a particularly difficult night. I was having a conversation with one of my lower middle managers to try to make sure that everything was cleaned up before we left for the day. So the store opened about 2 hours before the end of our shift, which usually the last 2 hours of our shift was reserved for trying to get things as cleaned up as possible. Which, just from a project management perspective, the amount of cleanup work that had to be done, we wasted a lot of time just moving things in and out of the building. Anyways, the point is respect. I am talking to my lower middle manager, making sure that everything's coordinated, everything's going to be cleaned up, giving this manager kind of final instructions to disperse among her specific little team. And the store manager walks up to me. Mind you, technically the way that things should go, if the store manager has an issue, they should be talking to my boss, who should then be talking to my team. The store manager should not be talking directly to me. So the interaction that I'm about to describe with the store manager technically should never have happened to begin with. But the store manager comes up to me and interrupts the conversation that I'm having, thereby slowing down what needs to happen, because I was literally in the middle of communicating things that needed to be communicated for them to be able to go do their job. And we are on the sales floor, the store is open, there are customers. It's early morning, so there's not a lot of customers, but there are customers. And the store manager starts yelling at me. And when I say yelling, I mean literally angry, loud voice yelling. I have my own personal opinions about yelling at work. I feel like there's not really a reason to be yelling at work. I can understand being frustrated. I can understand needing to be loud, especially if it's a situation where you need to be loud to get people's attention. I understand yelling in the case of safety. I do not think that managers should yell out of anger at their employees, but that is very much a personal thing, and I know that not everyone agrees with me on that. However, in terms of respect, the store manager should not have yelled at me on the sales floor in front of one of my employees. As mentioned, the conversation should not have happened at all with me. It should have been the store manager going to my boss. But even if we do want to cut out the middleman, because I understand that's not the most efficient route of communication, what really should have happened is the store manager should have said, hey, can we go to the back room? The fact that the store manager yelled at me in front of one of my employees, first of all, undermines my authority with that employee. But it was also happening in front of customers, which is not a good look. What the store manager was yelling at me about also had nothing to do with me and what my team was doing. Which brings me to number 4. Pay attention to who you're blaming and what for, and if that even makes sense to blame them. I'll also kind of tie it back to respect by saying, if you were wrong about who you're blaming, apologize. The store manager was blaming me for something that had nothing to do with what I was doing. It was the mess of some of the other teams that were working overnight. But this wasn't the only instance of me being blamed for something that had nothing to do with me. My boss, on multiple occasions, ordered the wrong parts for what we needed to accomplish, which meant that we on overnights were not able to do all of our jobs because we didn't have the pieces that we needed. And so the boss would come in the morning and be upset because we didn't accomplish certain things. And the worst thing about it was my boss never waited for an explanation. It was always a situation of, this should have been done, you suck. Never those exact words, although the words idiot and stupid did come out of his mouth multiple times. Once things calmed down, I was able to walk my boss through what we did do and why we weren't able to do the things that we didn't do. My boss was always still mad after the fact and never came back and apologized to me for any of the things that he said to me, which made me feel great. And it was pretty much the same thing every morning. So that was fun. Number 5, kind of drifting along into the process here. Don't retaliate. Don't even threaten retaliation, honestly. So at the time that I was in this job, I did not realize that retaliation is actually very illegal. So if an employee, in good faith, reports somebody else, be it to HR or an ethics department or however the company is organized, whoever they're supposed to report misconduct of any kind to, and the person who has been reported catches wind on having been reported, they cannot legally threaten anything against anyone regarding that report. Additionally, if somebody threatens to report somebody else, person being reported on cannot threaten retaliation. It's very illegal, and I didn't know it at the time, but I do now. So the store manager was generally just an awful person. It was very common for the store manager to go around yelling at employees on the sales floor, would call them names, generally belittle them, threaten them with their jobs, threaten them with their pay. All things that I'm not sure if they could actually legitimately do, but that's beside the point. But the store manager had been reported to ethics by multiple people throughout the time of this project. There was one morning I was waiting for my boss to say that I could leave. I had already been there for at least 16 hours because I had gotten in early that night to get a head start on things. And so I'm sitting in the back room while they're having a department manager meeting. And the store manager mentions that she's caught wind that she's been reported to the company ethics department. And if they find out who did it, they're getting fired. It never sat right with me. And I do appreciate now knowing that what I witnessed that day was very illegal. And truly that store manager should have lost their job then and there. Tip number 6, and this really goes back to respect. Honestly, all of these really rely on respect for people as individuals, but respect employees' time. So I mentioned that the particular day that I was overhearing the department manager meeting, I was working for 16 hours. 16-hour days were very common. I would get up, I would go into work. Mind you, this is night shift. Usually on my way in, I would hit up a fast food restaurant and eat in the back office while I did some of my pre-work computer stuff. And then I would walk the floor. I was always there before all of my employees just to make sure that I had a good sense of what needed to happen and what was where and just anything that I could pre-work, just to try to make things run as smoothly as possible once all my employees got there. Often I found myself working through lunch, if not in whole, at least in part. And then the day shift would come in and they would be getting ready to go to lunch by the time I was finally leaving the building. And then I would usually end up going through another drive-through and going back to my hotel and immediately passing out so I could do it all over again. One of the perks that I was supposed to have with that job was being able to travel, because it really was a traveling job. And I didn't really get to experience that perk because whenever I was somewhere, I was working too much to be able to explore. Overnight specifically was supposed to be a little bit more fun because then I have all day that I can do things. And I can kind of adjust when I sleep to go do whatever it is that I want to do. I was working so much that anytime I wasn't working, I needed to be sleeping. There were a few times that I would get phone calls during the day, this is while I'm trying to sleep, from my boss, from the day shift people, and from corporate for other random nonsensical things that had nothing to do with what I was actually paid to do. And so, if you made it this far, here's tip number 7 for how not to be a terrible boss, manager, person. Do your job. If you are a manager, it is important for you to do your job. So I come from a very servant leadership mindset when it comes to being a manager, which I understand is not everybody's perspective. A manager, a leader, is not just somebody that tells everybody what to do and bosses them around. They are there to lead the project. Sometimes as a manager that means stepping back and watching people work just to make sure that things are being done correctly, but often that is not necessary. The best managers that I've ever had have been people that are fully willing to step in and work right alongside their employees. Truly being a leader is about being part of a team. As a leader, you are directing the team, but you are also a part of that team. That means you are putting in the work. On my team, if I didn't work alongside my employees, things would not have gotten done. I would often take a step back, kind of check on everybody, make sure everything was happening that needed to be happening, and then I would dive back in. In my particular role on that project, I would never do anything that was super intensive or that would take a lot of time, because truly I needed work that I could pull myself away from on a moment's notice. But I wasn't just standing there watching people do work. I was an active participant. And that's where issues with my boss arose. Granted, he was my boss. I don't know all of the components that went into his job. However, I do know they were supposed to rotate shifts occasionally. And generally what that means is at least once every couple of weeks, my boss was supposed to be on night shift with us. There was exactly one time in that entire project that my boss was there when I came in for night shift. Stuck around for 2 hours. Kind of walked me through what we were supposed to do that night verbally. My employees came in at 10 p.m. and my boss stuck around until midnight. As I sent all of my employees to first break at midnight, my boss said, well, it looks like you have everything under control for once, which what kind of backhanded compliment is that? And then my boss went and picked up some snacks and left. And we did not see my boss again until the morning. So yeah, this has been 7 tips for how not to be a sucky boss, sucky manager, sucky leader. What I find funny, just looking back on my experience with that job, for all of these takeaways that I have, there were still more bad experiences that I had on this one project. The number of times that I wanted to quit just during this initial project was significantly more than 0. I will offer one additional piece of advice for employees who are in maybe not the best workplace situations. I guess truly 2 pieces of advice. First one, understand your rights and recognize when they're being violated and do something about it. I know it's scary because it is definitely an opportunity to lose your job, but also keep in mind, if you don't step forward, who will? If you step forward, you are more likely to get other people to also step forward and stand with you. The second piece of advice, if you are in a situation where the workplace is just genuinely toxic, whether it's legal or not, if it is genuinely impacting your mental health, like my job did for me, because let me tell you, I was in a very bad space when I was in that job, do whatever you can to get out. Chances are, it's not gonna get better. Yeah, that was me complaining about the worst job I ever had. And even at that, it wasn't even the job, it was the people I was working with. Granted, I have some feedback for the whole rest of the job. And if any of these elements sound like how you work as a manager, maybe reevaluate. That sounded really sassy. So I guess that's where we're at now. Okay. So that's where I'm gonna end this video. I hope you enjoyed hearing my trauma. And if you have any workplace stories that you would like to share or any additional tips that you would like to add, leave them down in the comments down below. And while you're down there, be sure to like this video if you enjoyed it, and also subscribe to my channel because I post new videos every Wednesday for whatever Wednesday. And until next week, I will see you next time. Bye-bye!